master of the triple threat, the technician, weighing 237 and 1/4 pounds, from Spring Lake, New Jersey. I give you upstairs tonight, my little brother, no gimmicks needed, Mr. Chris Candido.
When he was in 7th grade, he had this desire to have wrestling come to Spring Lake in the park. So he dressed himself up in a little suit and tie and went to the town council meeting carrying a little briefcase and said why he should have wrestling in Spring Lake.
Chris had come up with the idea. We're going to put on a wrestling show. I've been around it my whole life. We're going to do it, but we're not going to have pros. We're going to get kids. Maybe, we'll call Larry, we'll rent the ring. That first show, I think we had 20 people, maybe, and it was actually historical because it was the first ever pro match for Bam Bam Bigelow.
This is what we call the office. This is my brother's sanctuary, my sanctuary too. All the old posters that he used to hang up, thousands and thousands of wrestling magazines all over. These are all pictures he drew as a kid in art class and everything. We got here the NWA title. When he won the NWA title, he put it in this covering here. When I won it, the NWA Midwest, I put mine in there too, so we can kind of be together, in that poster. And all his pictures, his drawings. This was like pretty much his sanctuary where he came. All of his wrestling stuff. As you can see, the Monster Factory back there. He painted this Monster Factory picture. He was a big fan. Or what do you call it? This is where he trained, and his life was pretty much wrestling, and this room pretty much reflects that.
My first program was with Tim Horner, and we did the thing where I was a crybaby and bitch and moan about stuff, and he did a deal one night. And he said, as you say, because I came with the Dennis Carluzzo's belts, and I was the real world champion. And I did promos saying every week I would talk about guys I'd beat, and I would throw out names like Hogan, Flair, Jushin Liger, and I would always throw in somebody else. And then Tim Horner said, well, you're supposed to be a world champion. I bet it was Robbie Eagle, who was later on the Maestro. He said, I bet you can't even beat this guy. I said, Robbie, how many matches have you won on Smoky Mountain TV? He said, none. I said, then, you think I can't beat him? He's like, yeah, you know what? It's like, you can't beat him. And in fact, I bet he beats you. When he does beat you, you have to wear the baby bonnet on, until you win another match on TV. So I commenced to whomping the hell out of Robbie Eagle, and here comes Tim Horner in, ready to hit me, but then drops the elbow on Robbie. So I got DQ'd from there, and how I had to wear this big blue baby bonnet, like the cow wears on the milk or whatever, the cottage cheese, that big thing. And then they put me and Brian together. That's how me and Tammy ended up being together too.
You're so good at playing the coward, which a lot of people in WCW were afraid to do. Believe it or not, it takes a strong man to play a good coward, and Chris Candido was a very strong man.
I remember the first time I ever noticed that he was super famous. We were at Great Adventure. He took my sister and I to Magic Kingdom or Safari or something, and we were walking around, and I remember a woman approached him with a bunch of kids, and she was like, excuse me, we know who you are. Can we have an autograph? And I remember thinking so cool.
As far as his time in WWF though, he had a great time. He got to see the whole world, got to go everywhere. He did more in his 33 years than people do in their entire lives. As far as traveling and just seeing the world and doing what you love to do. Really, he's a real passionate guy. Just, like I said, you could tell from this room, everything in his life was wrestling. That's all he cared about, wrestling and family. That pretty much sums him up.
Me and him could go do anything, and we'd never stop talking about wrestling. We went to a Kiss concert, and we spent the entire concert talking about wrestling, chopping each other like Chief Jay Strongbow, doing a war dance. It's just like two school kids.
When we went to WWF, you would kind of hear things, but we were still so new that we got kayfabe and all that stuff that everybody was doing. But then Tammy got her tits done for the first time, and her doctor gave her a whole big sample bag, just samples of Vicodin. She was like, I don't need these.
The first day that I got into the WWF locker room, a friend of mine, not Chris, but one of the other boys, said, "Hey man, welcome." Put a handful of pills in my hand and said, "You're going to need them." And wasn't so much for the pain; it was more for the putting up with the nonsense and the bullshit and the politics, just the garbage that goes on up there.
Already by this time, my brain wasn't always working, so I wasn't realizing the fact that that checks were slowing down, that I wasn't being used, and I was pretty much just semi-coherent when it was time to go to work, which became less and less for whatever reason. The rest of the time, I didn't even know what was going on much, of anything. There has to be something that just clicks in you for whatever reason to make you want to stop or not be as stupid.
The one day we're sitting there, we're at a restaurant, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "I go to these fucking indie shows, and these kids, they're all skinny or they're fat, they have no muscles, they have no fucking gear. When I was 18, I was all fucking jacked up. I was going to Japan, da da da." I go, "That's why you were a fucking standout, numbnuts." And I hit him in the head, and he's like, he just buries his head in his hands, and he goes, "I really fucked everything up, didn't I?" I said, "No, you didn't fuck everything up." I said, "I'm like, you're 30 years old. You're 29 years old. I'm like, you can get back going. I'm like, let's do this."
But then I guess he had an aha moment and said, "What the hell am I doing? This is really not good." And he really, really, really cleaned up his act to the point where I was like, wow, this is the Christopher I know and love. Look at, you're back. Here you are.
And then it was almost overnight that he got back in the saddle, back getting booked constantly, back doing great. And then it was within a couple months that he was either going to go to WWE or TNA. I remember going with him to Raw the one night, and then he was talking to TNA, and he was like, basically, he's like, "I have this fucking house to pay for, so whoever comes first with the check, I'm going to go with." And TNA came first, and that's where he went,
And that lasted for about a year and a half. And then he was in Florida wrestling, broke his ankle.
Oh, you can see right there, you go. And it just was one of them freak accidents where it catches right underneath underneath Sonny Siaki. He knows it right away. And look at him waving over.
He called me and he said, "Ma, the cameraman stuck a camera in the ring and I tripped over it and I broke my ankle, and it was a Sunday, and I have to have surgery. And they're going to put in 2 plates and 8 screws." And that was going to be on Monday. And then on Tuesday, he called and the surgery was okay. And then on Wednesday, he said, I'm just going to come home. I'm on my way home. Surgery went well. The next day, he was on television in a wheelchair at the ring on a show. My office stopped. We all went into my waiting room and we all watched it. It was the next day. It was the day after surgery. They were wheeling him in. And there he was, with his arms flailing and him talking and his fingers pointing. And the next thing I knew, I was getting a call Thursday night that I had to meet him in the hospital, and there it was. Over.
I got that the night of the funeral, so I'm never going to forget him. And hopefully none of you people will either.
And one of the biggest thrills that I got was I got to talk to the people in France and Germany, just like I am to you right this very minute. And the coolest thing is, even though they didn't understand half the stuff I was saying to them, when I left the building and I walked out the ringside area, in France and in Germany, there was an entire building full of people chanting Chris's name. Now, I know there ain't as many of you here that was at the beginning of this show, but let's stand up and make some noise and let Chris know in heaven above that he's loved and missed and always will be. Los Candidos, my amigo, I love you.
It really makes you feel good to know that I wasn't the only one who loved him. Everybody loved him. He was a really, really good kid. He really was. And it's very satisfying to know that he's not here, but he's not forgotten.
Chris was a great guy. I loved him to death. He was like a brother.
And the times when I was down and out, I could always pick up the phone and call him. That's the kind of guy he was. I guess heaven needed a world champion, and that's Chris Candido.
Chris Candido entertained me more than any other wrestler that I have ever seen get into the ring.
There was never an unentertaining moment with us. You know what I mean? Whether it was good or bad, we entertained the hell out of you.
And he was just the greatest older brother ever. You know, like as a little kid when you're scared, you know, you have a bad dream and you, normally little kids run into their parents' room. I'd run up here with him and we'd watch wrestling tapes.
He was always very, very loving. Like he would always walk in, give you like a huge hug, crack your back, like give you a big kiss on the cheek. He'd always say, "Hey, sister," when you walked in the door.
The week before he passed away, we were driving on Route 71 here in Spring Lake Heights and going to the 7-Eleven, and this was like his favorite song, Fleetwood Mac, "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow," and he played it in his car and just on repeat. We were just driving around town, and it was just, whenever I hear the song, my heart stops to beat, and I'm just like, oh, my brother's here. It's a good upbeat song. Yeah.